It's my pleasure to introduce to you a dynamic speaker. And not only that, actually, after you listen to her talk, you will learn how much money you're going to spend. Because she will convince you that all this money you spend in food store, from omega-3 to vitamin D to vitamin E and all that everything is no good. I better save it and enjoy life and the money for a cruise for a good food. Dr. Erin Michos, that's her married name now. She's Donnelly, but she married to a Greek because of the good diet over there.
Yes.
And she's she's from Johns Hopkins, associate professor and director, co-director of the prevention program. I'm going to really teach you a very good course. Thanks, Erin, for being here.
All right, thanks for having me. And if any of you were at Sarasota Memorial Hospital, this is similar to what the Grand Mounds I gave on Friday. So I certainly am a huge enthusiasm about a healthy diet. I wish I could tell you that you can capture that magic bullet in a pill form. But unfortunately, the large majority of data which I will present has not found any benefit for the large majority of nutritional supplements. And then I hope to convince you that really diet is best, that you can get almost all of the minerals and vitamins and nutrients you need by following a heart-healthy diet. So what exactly is a supplement? So the Congress defined a supplement in 1994 as any dietary ingredient that's taken to supplement the diet. And it's a really broad catch-all thing that includes vitamins and herbs and minerals and amino acids and enzymes. But importantly, the way it was labeled is it falls under the umbrella of food and not drugs. And that's important because even though many of these compounds are biologically active and actually can carry some risks in some cases, federal law does not require the dietary supplements to be proven safe before they're put on the market. They're not regulated at all. If they're found to be harmful or a bad contaminant, the FDA will remove them off the market, but they don't have to be proven to be safe or efficacious before they're sold. And there has been cases where there's been contaminations, and there's been several studies where they've collected bottles from many different of these health stores, and there's a huge variability from bottle to bottle about how much of the active ingredient is in there, and often there's active ingredients in there that were found that wasn't even on the label. So even though that Congress, when they passed this, the dietary supplements were never intended to treat or diagnose or cure or alleviate disease, many individuals take them because they think most people who take these things are wanting to do something for their health, and they think they're doing something to prevent disease, when most of the time this has never been proven. And the reason why I have this and talk over and over again is because 52% of US adults report taking one of these supplements, and again, there's very little evidence for their benefit. But yet, if I were to poll this room, statistically 1 in 2 of you take some kind of supplement, and maybe afterwards you can tell me why. The supplements have been largely stable over the decades, and this is NHANES' survey data of the United States from 1990 to 2012, and it's really stayed around 50% in the red line. But there's differences in demographics where older adults over the age of 65, 70% of older adults take a supplement. Women take more supplements than men. Caucasian whites take more supplements than minorities, and college educated takes more supplements than less educated. So in essence, what we have is white educated women who are taking supplements, and arguably this is the demographic that's probably least at risk for an actual nutritional deficiency. And really, if you don't actually have a deficiency, more is not better. And these things are not benign. There's 23,000 emergency room visits every year related to adverse effects of supplements. In children, there can be overdose because the gummy vitamins look like candy, and children have overdosed on them. And people are spending enormous amount of money on this, $21 billion every year on supplements. It's estimated about $300 billion globally by 2024. So I want to ask you, though, how much value are we really getting in preventing major cardiovascular events by spending all this money on this stuff? And would this better be served on supplementing, heart-healthy food sources, fruits and vegetables? So what I hope to tell you, or is review the data with you, is that in most times these supplements don't work, and that real food that when it's taken in its own natural form and the body absorbs it through the gut is better than anything that was created in a lab artificially trying to replace a food nutrient. So there's this, a series of meta-analyses from randomized clinical trials. This was one that was published in JACC over the summer. This is looking at antioxidants, and there was a huge enthusiasm, and I won't go through all the individual trials. Dr. Wagner reviewed one of them in the women antioxidants study. But not only were they not shown to be beneficial antioxidants, but actually there's been a trend towards harm with a slight increased risk of mortality. And the U.S. Preventative Task Force actually gives it a D recommendation. People should not be taking antioxidant supplements. Why was this so disappointing? It was thought that actually this may actually suppress your immune system, and that some immunity is good, and that this may actually downregulate important biological pathways instead of helping. Now, the one exception may be in folate. Now, in the United States, our food is fortified. All our cereals and bread are fortified. So there's usually adequate intake in the U.S. with folic acid. And so all the trials in Western countries have been null about B vitamins and folate in preventing disease. But in China, they don't supplement foods. And there was a trial called the China Stroke Prevention trial in 2015. It was hypertensive adults in China that were given enalapril plus folate compared to enalapril alone, and there was a significant reduction in stroke. So when you add in this one study that had over 10,000 individuals from China, there was a benefit of folate with stroke reduction, but there was not seen in any Western trials, and so it still remains uncertain whether there's any role in any of this in parts of the world where there's adequate folate in the diet. Niacin's another one that's been disappointing. B3 has actually not been shown to be beneficial for cardiovascular disease and a trend towards harm. And I think I took the slide out, but I mentioned it on Friday in my grand rounds. B7, biotin, we need to ask our patients about that as well, because really high intake of biotin can affect important immunoassays of lab studies like TSH and troponin, and so that we might get erroneous results from those lab results related to how the immunoassays work. So it's really important that we ask patients what they're taking. Now, lots of people take a multivitamin, again, and I'm not sure why. This was a meta-analysis that I did with my colleagues that was published over the summer. We had 18 studies, 2 million individuals. This was cohorts in clinical trials, and it was all null. There's no benefit that we found of multivitamin use with over 2 million individuals on any cardiovascular disease or stroke mortality. Now, omega-3s, I had given up on omega-3s. Again, a lot of the trials have been disappointing. This was actually 10 clinical trials, 78,000 high-risk adults, and this meta-analysis that was also published this summer in JAMA Cardiology, again, was null, suggesting that at least dietary omega-3s, which are typically DHA and EPA, don't seem to benefit. And that was also seen to be confirmed with the ASCEND trial that came out shortly after that in diabetes, where 1 gram of fatty acids, omega-3s, did not reduce cardiovascular events in diabetics. So I had kind of written these, and then the VITAL trial also, this was just came out in November. This was interesting in that, again, it was largely null. It was 25,000 individuals free of cardiovascular disease and cancer. So this one was a primary prevention trial. I'll talk about VITAL again when we talk about vitamin D. It was a factorial design. But over 5 years, the main outcome, the primary outcome, the composite major cardiovascular outcome was null. For 1 gram a day of marine fatty acids, there was no reduction in the major cardiovascular events. Now, there were a few interesting signals, which I would say is exploratory for subgroup analyses in VITAL. There was a reduction in the secondary outcome of MI, but not in stroke or overall cardiovascular death. And there was a reduction in major events in a subgroup that reported taking low fish intake. But again, I think since the primary outcome was null, that any subgroup analysis should be reviewed with caution. But I think the one trial that sort of really perked my interest again in omega-3s was the Reduce It trial, which you've heard a little bit about it, with icosapent ethyl. Now, this is a very highly purified form of EPA. And so the very exciting results of Reduce It, which I will review for you, does not extrapolate to the over-the-counter fish oil that you can get, which is largely a mixture of various oils, DHA and EPA. This is a proprietary, the CEPA is by First